Hello and welcome to Identity Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. Today is episode 198. And before we get started, a quick reminder to please follow Identity Office Hours on LinkedIn or YouTube. The topic today is mix-up attacks in MCP, multi-issuer confusion and mitigations. And our guest today, as you can see, is Emily Lauber. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me here, Mike.
So this is a talk that I actually saw you give at the MCP Dev Conference in New York. What was that, February or March? I can't even remember.
That was April. It feels
April.
so much longer ago, but that was the first week of April. Yeah.
Thank you. And so yeah, I like the talk and I like this topic, and so I thought it'd be a good topic for our audience. But before we dive into that, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your background for maybe people who don't know you.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I'm a senior product manager at Microsoft. Originally in my first life, I was a civil engineer. What I have found I love is, the intersection of people and technology. So originally that was civil engineering. And then I moved into software and joined identity at Microsoft about 5 years ago, kind of at random because I love infrastructure and developer tools. And now I've been sucked into the identity universe and love it so much. So that's where I am today.
Okay. And we're very glad to have you in the identity universe. And now you're officially an identity because you've been on this live stream. So this is one of the more complicated topics. Normally you think mix-up attacks and you think a lot of like flow chart or sequence diagrams. And we're going to try and verbally walk through this thing. And so I have some questions. I'm going to try and go from easy to hard, and we'll just see how it goes. So my first question is, what exactly is a mix-up attack, and why should MCP developers be thinking about this?
Yeah, so mix-up attacks are actually not new. They have been written about since 2016 in the auth IETF working group. Why it becomes... First, I'll talk about why it's prevalent for MCP developers. One is that with AI and MCP specifically, what we're seeing are these non-deterministic connections to multiple authorization servers, multiple resources from a single client, which is exactly what you need to make a mix-up attack happen. Mix-up attacks are essentially where a client is interacting with two authorization servers, and one authorization server, for lack of a better word, impersonates the other authorization server. And so the client sends authorization server tokens, access codes, auth codes, whatever they are, identity artifacts to the wrong authorization server. So that's where the mix-up happens, sending the wrong artifacts to the wrong authorization server.
Okay, and you had a very unique approach for this, and I'm going to try and show. We don't normally show a lot of graphics here, but I think this one is worthy. Let me find some features you will be familiar with.
Yes.
The Pasta Boys.
My Pasta Boys. Mm-hmm. So
maybe you could introduce them, but I do have a question. Why is Fuseli why is the world tilted 90 degrees for him?
Oh, he is just, I'm curious if he'll come over here. Fuseli. He might hop up and join us at some point. I just thought he looked so handsome that way. You get to see some rainbow lights on them. So as you can imagine, I have many photos of my pets on my phone. So this was maybe the hardest part of the presentation, was picking which photo for which pet. So that's where it's there. And I will, because someone will notice this in the comments, Fuseli is not spelled the way that the pasta is spelled. I got him from the shelter. That's the way his name was spelled from the shelter. I've been calling him Fuseli and pretending it's the pasta Fuseli or whatever it's pronounced.
And in the mix-up attack, I think this was sort of a helpful approach, because these attacks can be very abstract. And so actually thinking about these actors or being able to name these actors is better than like client A or client B. So in our scenario, how does this map to our mix-up actors?
Yeah. So I fully agree. Even at the start of this office hours, when I was trying to explain the attack, it's like this authorization server and the other authorization server. It can get very confusing. So the model, as you said here, is that basically I have one authorization server for the guinea pigs. So that's our guinea pig authorization server, and one authorization server for the cat. So in the MCP world, say, for example, I have a client that is my smart home. That's my agent. And then I have a MCP resource, a server resource that we'll call pets MCP. And so I have my two different authorization servers based on the type of animal pet that connects to that pet MCP. They're both trusted authorization servers. These are all the pets in my home. But the idea for the mix-up attack is that the cat authorization server attempts to take the tokens from the guinea pig authorization server by confusing the MCP server or pets MCP to give it the tokens for the guinea pig. And the guinea pigs, sorry, if you see me looking over, the guinea pigs are being very loud right now. I don't know what they're up to. I think they know I'm talking about them.
The record for loud pets was one of my guests had canaries.
Oh my
And
God.
the canaries started singing in the middle of the show, and the microphone decided it liked the canaries better than the guest, and so it like automatically like muffled the guest and went full on canary.
Full canary.
So I sometimes ask about canaries just to make sure people don't have canaries. Um, I also subsequently went into a phase where I was ready to get canaries, because once you have birds, one type of bird, not that hard to get another type of bird. So my wife had to restrain me from getting canaries. So it almost happened. Because they are pretty fascinating when I started reading about them. Okay, so there's a guinea pig MCP server and a cat MCP server. I'm sorry, there's a guinea pig
Yeah.
authorization server and there's a cat authorization server. And sort of the scenario we're laying out is that the cat is going to be the cat authorization server is going to be the attacker here, and the guinea pigs are the unknowing MCP users who their MCP server gets somehow attacked and leaks some tokens that they don't want to be leaked.
Yeah. And where this gets tricky, without pulling up, the full auth diagram, is that it looks like to almost every party a valid OAuth flow, because what happens here is that MCP server or the user agent via the client will make a authorization request to the cat authorization server. And it's the cat authorization server that, once it gets that request, it 302 redirects to the guinea pig authorization server. So it looks like, from the client perspective, that they made a valid authorization request. The guinea pig authorization server, it looks like they've received one, and they send the tokens back to the redirect URI, which that's an important part of this attack, which I think we'll get into mitigations later. But the assumption for this attack is that that client has a single redirect URI.
Right. So I want to dig a little bit into MCP here. What's different about MCP's authorization model that makes this mix-up attack maybe more dangerous?
Yeah, there's a few different things about the MCP model. One is that a non-deterministic dynamic component there. So, for example, MCP supports DCR, dynamic client registration, but also MCP in the latest specification recommendations, which I think was released last month and will be finalized potentially in July. It includes SIMD, the client ID metadata document. And so that would have these redirect URIs for clients. But also it's just MCPs connect to more authorization servers than before. And they connect dynamically, whether through DCR or SMPTE. It's non-deterministic. They don't know ahead of time. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is just this level of phishing that might be more common in the MCP because there are all of these unknown connection points that people are really having to built-in trust compared to kind of more lockdown scenarios where you might need like an IT admin to even approve a connection. MCP is really focused on being able to be dynamic in the moment.
Hmm. And it just prompts you like in the screen, do you want to trust this? Yes. Do you want to do this? Yes. And you just get into like the chat of like, yes, yes, I want you to actually work.
Yep.
And so,
yeah, it's the same consent phishing and those types of scenarios that we've seen for a long time in identity. It's just the scale of what's happening. So MCP attacks are not unique to the MCP ecosystem. The idea though is just that they are more likely or more prevalent or happening at a greater speed because of the scale and the dynamicness of the MCP ecosystem.
So maybe we could walk through a normal MCP authorization flow and look at where the decisions are made and where an attacker could potentially interfere with that flow.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to try
And
to do this.
if we need a diagram and you want me to, I do have the slides. If we really want to pull up a diagram, we can. But a lot of people watch us on their phones. So,
So they're not going to zoom in
yeah.
deeply on this diagram.
So I don't know if we can verbally walk through like what does a normal MCP authorization flow look like, and where does it potentially can it go wrong?
Yeah, so I will try to verbally walk through as best as I can. I mean, if we start from the very beginning, this would be the user wants to connect to some sort of MCP resource through their clients, through their agents. The agent then needs to go find these resources. They do that through the protected resource metadata. This is where, oh, hey, I'm the smart home client, and I need to access information about the pets in the home. So it's our pets MCP server. The server makes the calls out to authorization servers for the requested metadata. Actually, the server and the client are doing this communication. We're not yet at our authorization servers. When they do that is when the authorization server information comes in later to say, okay, you found your pet's MCP resource. To access the data, you need authorization. When we go through more of this to get our authorization server metadata, this is all just figuring out who's connected to who and how I can talk to each other. When we get into the actual authorization point, our client, that's our smart home agent here, opens the browser with the authorization endpoint, browser user agent. I tend to default to browser language. Then it makes our authorization request to the authorization server. That authorization server returns that information, not back to the user agent, but it returns it to the client itself. Sorry, I'm looking at the diagram while I'm trying to do this. Yeah, it redirects back with the authorization code. That authorization code gets sent to the client. The client then uses the authorization code to request a token from the authorization server, and that token gets returned to the client's redirect URI. So there's a lot of trusted points all around.
So there could be a consent box in the browser that because I'm assuming in this flow you're describing we're already logged in, and so but there could be a consent or there could not be a consent, right? It's hard to say whether the browser, even though it might flow through the browser, there might or might not be a consent there.
Right.
And so, okay, so the home wants to feed the guinea pigs,
Yep.
and it needs to, and so it sends a command, feed guinea pigs, to the MCP server, and in order to do that, it needs a token. And there's a human in there, it sounds like you're saying, that ultimately determines whether this home MCP server should be able to call the the feed guinea pigs MCP action.
Yeah, it does. It does depend, as you called out, on that consent thing. So, or consent prompt, whether or not it shows up for the human. Because if this system you're already pre-consented to, or you've already allowed these things, it could just go through automatically without really needing the user involved. I would argue that if it's especially the first time that we're connecting to this authorization server, you need some sort of consent approval, or if it's the first time connecting to these information, or if maybe some information changes. It depends on how the system set it up, where it wants that human in the loop approval. I do think that it needs to happen at the authorization server selection point.
Okay. Okay. So this all sounds fine. Sounds like my guinea pigs are getting fed. You know.
Mhm.
So where does it go wrong?
Yeah. So in that authorization server selection point that the client is, or that the user is doing, you can imagine, because the cat here is able to define its own authorization server metadata, it maybe changes its metadata to, instead of looking like cat as the human readable, it's like guinea pig with ones for the eyes. So I, as the user, I'm clicking through, I'm used to doing this. Instead of selecting regular guinea pig, I select cat pretending to be guinea pig with eyes, or eyes, ones for the eyes. And so you select that one. And so that's where, as the user, I'm expecting the authorization to go to the guinea pig, but it's actually the cat here who's changed, it's maliciously changed the authorization server to look like the guinea pig server. And then it continues to flow that way.
Okay. And it actually still obtains an access token for the guinea pig API, so it can decide whether to feed guinea pigs. But it might return the token back to the client, so the client might not even notice that something's wrong because it got its token and it's happy.
Yep.
But now it has a copy of that token, and it can also call the resource.
Yeah, that's why this attack can be so sneaky, is because each individual actor in this flow is doing the appropriate steps. If they're following the OAuth protocol, they're doing the appropriate steps and think that they're doing the right thing and getting the right information back in return. So everyone thinks they're doing as expected, and no one notices that the cat is impersonating the guinea pigs.
So Pixie is a challenge that's sent, I guess, that helps you ensure that I guess that they're in the response so what's the right way to explain Pixie? So I guess Pixie is I always think of it as like a state from the server, not from the client. I know maybe you could do a better job of explaining, why do people think Pixie will help? And because it always seems like Pixie was used to make sure you have a connection to a certain client, even when the client can't have a secret and be authenticated. That's sort of the point of Pixie. And so I guess in this case, we're saying if we use Pixie, we are able to authenticate the client, but the client here is not in question. So I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts on why people think Pixie will help or why Pixie doesn't help?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely Pixie, and even for me, is a hard thing to explain. But it is about confirming that server client relationship. The authorization server gets this request from a browser. It can't trust what the browser said. So it sends the information to the redirect URI, or that is registered with this Pixie for the client itself. And this is where, because both the cat and the guinea pig authorization servers are registered with the client, they're both valid authorization servers. So they both have access to the Pixie for the client. So the client returns this information and says, oh, great, you have the proof key. Yeah, okay, you know who I am. So they have the valid relationships. And so that's where Pixie doesn't stop here or it doesn't help prevent this, because they're both valid authorization servers. It's just that one authorization server, the cat, is acting maliciously.
So I've heard it said that validating the issuer is one of the key mitigations. Why would validating the issuer here help? Because I thought these are both valid issuers that are both trusted, just for different MCP actions.
Yeah. So part of where this mix-up happens, and this goes back to the redirect URI part of it, is that when the pet MCP server sends that first authorization request, it's kind of sending it out into the wild, sending it out to what it thinks is the valid authorization server. But once it sends that request, it's listening on a single redirect URI. It's just listening on, I don't know, petmcp.com/auth/redirect URI. Pretty generic name right there. And so when it gets information back on that redirect URI, it assumes it was the request that it started, because it sent one thing out, it got one thing back. Where issuer helps is that when it sends that request out, it includes the issuer parameter of like where it sent that initial request. So for this would be, oh, I issued this request to the cat authorization server. And then when the client is listening on the redirect URI, the response includes the issuer for the guinea pig authorization server. And that's where the client would be able to check, like, hey, I sent this to the cat, but the guinea pig responded. That doesn't seem right. Whereas without the issuer, it says, oh, I sent this to an authorization server and an authorization server responded. Looks like it's good to go.
So when you say, so the token, because the token that gets minted would be the same, because we mentioned before that both the cat and the guinea pig MCP servers both have a copy of this valid token.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying is, because there's only one token, it can only have one issuer. And here the client would have an opportunity to see that the issuer is different than it expected, and be able to detect it. So we're talking about access tokens here. Wouldn't the access token, shouldn't it always have the issuer?
If you look at the IETF OAuth 2.0,
Yeah.
been out. I don't think 2.1 is out yet. Someone will update me if 2.1 is officially out yet. But 2.0, issuer is a recommended field, but it's not a required field, because OAuth includes not just MCP ecosystems, but other ecosystems where you maybe don't need to have issuer because it is only one client talking to one authorization server.
Yeah.
And so that's where issuer becomes required if there are multiple authorization servers talking to the same client. But if it's one-on-one, it's not officially required, and authorization servers may not even know that they should be sending issuer because they don't know how many authorization servers the client is talking to. They only talk to the client. They don't know that this client is talking to 3 other authorization servers. That's common in MCP, but it's not common in all of the ecosystems that use OAuth.
Right. And just to point out, maybe, well, nothing says that you're going to get back a value token in an OAuth exchange. You could get back a reference token.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually trying to think, where does it specify which claims are recommended or not? It's hard to even track that down. 6749 doesn't really talk about that. And the place where I used to always look is actually Justin Richards' token introspection response. Has details about what the response might look like, but I can't remember off the top of my head where the claims of an access token are even specified. And maybe I'll look at that offline. Do you know off the top of your head?
I know 9207 RFC is what introduces the authorization response issuer parameter supported to the server metadata parameters, but I don't think that's the actual one that does the claims.
Yeah.
I think
And
it's, nope, I don't know the number offhand.
and we can be forgiven for not knowing, because there's like 30 RFCs right now in OAuth.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I mean, there's very few people who know all of those off the top of their head. I am definitely not one of them.
Well, and the issuer parameter itself does have its own RFC. It's an RFC 8414, which is about requiring it in specifically mix-up attack prevention scenarios. It's just that 8414, that RFC assumes that the authorization server knows if there's other authorization servers in the flow, then it knows to require it. But if you just look at OAuth 2.0, it doesn't require issuer there. I do know there are discussions in IETF, I haven't been involved in a few months, of requiring it in OAuth 2.1. Maybe that might happen. But I know for MCP, because the MCP ecosystem more commonly has this expectation, they are able to make it as a recommendation and eventually a required in sets for MCP.
I think we just have to revert to guilting vendors into putting it in there. I can just say, as a vendor,
Yeah.
put the darn issuer in there. It's so important to know who issued this token. It seems like we shouldn't even have to be having this discussion. The other thing I would say is also put in a JTI. So we have a primary key to reference the token instance, and think about implementing OAuth status lists. So there's there's a lot of good practices you can do to make your tokens more secure and use these features. If we're minting JWTs anyway, and these are going to be our reference token, or I'm sorry, our value tokens. Then if the trust model is JWTs, which are convenient for passing all over the place, then at least we need to use some of these security features, like issuer, which doesn't sound like a security feature to me.
Yeah, well, it's two-sided though. So like, yes, we need our authorization servers to be sending issuer, which is already a field that chances are they know if they're following OAuth to the letter of the protocol, they have issuer. But
or OpenID. OpenID tokens have issuer, as do most. Sorry to interrupt.
No, completely. Thank you for that call out. So we need our authorization server sending issuer, but we also need the clients validating issuer. Because if the authorization servers keep saying, oh, this was me, this was me, this was me, and our clients go, great, I don't know who I sent this to. We need both parties to be sending and receiving and validating the issuers that come through.
It's a really interesting point because one thing that I will say is that I'm somewhat sympathetic to developers pushing back on the complexity of validating tokens because it used to be easy. You'd say, oh, well, I'll validate the signature of the token to make sure of the integrity. But now then there's some contents you need to make sure it's not expired. There's also a claim called MBF. And now with OAuth status list, we're saying that you need to check for revocation potentially, because just because it's a JWT that's not expired doesn't mean it hasn't been revoked. So there's a revocation mechanism now. I guess issuer falls in the contents. You need to validate the contents. But in order to validate the contents, you have to be somewhat aware of the trust model that's in place here. And so I don't know. Any thoughts on the challenges of getting developers aligned with this mission?
Yeah, well, Mike, you actually, just in how you're describing it, you pointed out a great thing that it's actually not validating the token itself. The mix-up attack prevention, that is a whole separate concern that needs to happen for different attacks, as you talked about. But for mix-up attacks, it's issuer on the responses. So it's sending issuer for the authorization server request itself, and then the authorization server response. So before it even gets a token, before the client gets the token, it would understand like, oh, hey, I sent this request here. The response I got before it could be a response on the auth code. It could be a response with the tokens. It's just the response itself, that call, they would match those issuer there. So we're not even really opening the tokens yet. It's on the sending and receiving of the response information.
So when we request a token, normally there's a state parameter so that I get back reflected back from the server. And so in that state parameter, maybe the client would have to create a record. I made this request with this state. And when I get back this request, I should remember that this is the issuer I thought I was making it to, and this is who I should be getting it from, something like that.
Yeah, I'm less familiar with the state parts of it, but that would be the idea. It's just that the client, when it starts an authorization request, that the information it gets back, who it starts it with, is the same person that it completes the flow with.
Right, right, I get it. So you're right. There's nothing actually in the token that specified your original issuer request. So you'd have to know who
Yeah,
the issuer was. Makes
because
me
it's
wonder, maybe we should put that in the request so that way it comes back in the token.
and I think that's one of the ideas of the authorization. I believe it's called the authorization response issuer parameter supported metadata when talking about our authorization service. We love long names. We got to be very descriptive with these long names. Indicates whether or not the authorization server does include issuer in its response parameters.
Do you think vibe coding makes this whole problem worse? Or makes mix up more dangerous or more likely?
I do think vibe coding, I think it accelerates the problem. So, I mean, you and I are both identity professionals, and we don't have the RFCs memorized off the top of our head, and we have spent years working on this. And so, if a developer is doing vibe coding, the hope is that the LLM, the AI that they're doing this vibe coding with, has looked at these RFCs and then thereby builds exactly to the RFCs. And the LLM is able to make these connections to be like, oh, RFC 8414 says this and that interacts with this. But it's pretty complicated logic. And so developers that may not be familiar with identity trust their AI to be able to appropriately follow these protocols, these open source requirements, and build there. If the LLM messes up and does a different security configuration, most developers may not be able to notice that unless they are an identity expert. So the idea, though, of having these protocol, like the open standards, actually require these things much more directly, I think helps the vibe coding scenario, because then the LLMs will be reading the specifications and able to understand like this is a required field or this is not a required field. So I do think it makes it the scale of vibe coding is at risk of increasing the prevalence of this and also increasing people being unable to really catch it and notice it.
Yeah, and the vibe coding agent wants to make the human happy, not the RFCs happy. And so if it works, then the human's happy, whether it follows the RFCs or not. And as we said, there's a lot of RFCs. So you'd have to bring all those, to bring all those RFCs into the context. And then it's not even that straightforward anyway, because RFCs have mays and shoulds, or musts and shoulds. And so do you do all the shoulds? And so the RFCs aren't always like, it's not always like written in stone how you follow the RFCs. And that's why we have profiles, because the profiles sometimes say in this ecosystem, it says should, but here it's a must, and we're going to actually need to check this. I don't know.
That's exactly the hope of why this SEP for MCP was created. So so that people that are following or LLMs agents that are trying to build MCP servers or MCP authorization servers, if they follow that specification for MCP, it would have, for the July release, I believe it should include issuer and validate issuer, and then later releases, it will become a must. But exactly what you said, there's so many RFCs, there's so many different protocols. The LLM and the developer would need to know where to point and which to follow based on their scenarios.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm more in favor of an artifact that can be validated against a certain security specification. So when we get the artifact, if there's some algorithmic way we can validate it, versus having to rely on the code to remember the state, it just seems really problematic. Um, I would like something more concrete where we can say we validated the token, the issuer matches this other parameter, it's good, and we could have more rules. Um,
I
and
agree. We just need to make those rules easy to understand both for humans and for the agents.
and make orzo and rigatoni's food safe from Fuseli.
Yes. Safe from Fuseli trying to get them.
Maybe if I could pull back from MCP mix-up attack a little bit and just ask you, what were your thoughts on the MCP Dev Summit?
Yeah, I thought the MCP Dev Summit for me was so interesting because there are, what I heard from people, this was my first time attending an MCP Dev Summit, but many people talked about previous Dev Summits. And I think what I noticed this time around was how many presentations and discussions in the hallway were about real implementations of MCP servers, like what is happening at the enterprise level. I would say last year when it came out, it was more often consumer developers or smaller scenarios that were trying to use MCP, seeing how AI can use it. Whereas this time around, it was big enterprise customers talking about how they're using MCP there. And I work for Microsoft. I tend to do enterprise scenarios more often. To me, enterprise is really where these security boundaries get hardened, where they really get tested, and where to convince IT admins and people to be adopting these amazing new technologies, you really need proof that this is a trustworthy technology. And that's how I felt at the MCP Dev Summit, is we're seeing many stories of enterprises implementing this, what they learned, what challenges they had. And we're seeing many more security professionals engage with this to do things like requiring issuer for obscure mix-up attacks that most people have never heard of. But we have takeaways that we can do. And there's other presentations like that of how people in this open source ecosystem are trying to improve the security while having the flexibility and the adaptability and the scale that MCP enables. That was my takeaway. I'm curious, Mike, what was your takeaway there?
I thought it was going to be a geeky little conference, and I'm like, no one's going to be there because this topic is so geeky, like MCP Dev Summit. And I
Yeah.
was quite mistaken about that because I think it was like 1,500 people or more there, and it was really, and I saw really a level of excitement about this infrastructure that I haven't seen in the tech industry in a long time. And so I thought I was came away very optimistic that MCP is going to be a new foundational infrastructure, sort of like APIs. Just like it's a new type of interface with middleware that probably will be hosted by Microsoft and Amazon. And I don't know, will there be cloud MCP, cloud native MCP, that type of thing? But I don't know. It seemed to me that I was more convinced than ever that this is a new foundational infrastructure middleware that we're going to have to be thinking about. So.
Yeah, I mean, the pace of how things are developing and the ideas that people are coming up with, I do think MCP has demonstrated. A lot of people joked about the death of MCP for various things, but what I came away from the summit with is that people are using this. Enterprises are using this. People are adopting this. And I do think this infrastructure layer will be around.
Yeah.
I'm always though curious of like what frameworks and what AI connections are going to show up, not even next year, at the end of this year. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. As a very small software company here at Glue, we're buying tools, and I'm looking at the MCP interfaces for these things. So it's becoming a new interface at the product layer, that you're not only buying, like, let's take a marketing tool. And so we bought this new marketing tool at Glue. I'm not going to say which one, but we have a conference coming up, right? And I want to know, like, are the people who I see in my marketing tool going to the conference? And that's something that in the old days would take us a long time to do. But now with MCP, there's this interface that doesn't involve me going to coders and asking them to grok away code, for days, to just tell me, who has been looking at our stuff, who's also attending the conference, who I might want to talk to. And that's, so I don't know. I see it. I think it's really getting out there as a tool that's becoming part of products, and that's why enterprises are interested in it, because it's helping connect, unlock some of the data, and really, maybe like in a way Zapier used to in the old days, like connect all this stuff and like get real business value. So last question, we're a little over, a tad over. But if you could just improve one thing about MCP, what would it be? And would it be issuer value validation?
One thing about MCP that I would improve. Yeah, I'm gonna pick the easy question. I'm gonna say issuer validation. I wave my magic wand. All the MCP SDKs know how to validate it. All the MCP clients are using issuer parameter. All of the authorization servers are using it. I'm gonna pick the easy answer and say, yeah,
Right.
issuer. There's so many other amazing work happening in MCP. But I'm gonna stick with issuer. I'm gonna say, yeah, let's prevent mix-up attacks. Let's do an easy win.
Nice. Okay. And with that, I'll just give you a chance. Last thoughts in case I've missed asking a question, or anything that's coming up that you want to, or summaries, whatever you want.
Ooh. I would say the thought that I have, I am so grateful for how many people have enjoyed me talking about my pets when it comes to authorization servers. So my last thought is that I learn best sometimes when I can break away from the technical and give more abstract metaphors. And I'm glad that this has resonated with other people. And I want more of this. I want more people to be explaining technical topics to me with their pets, because it's cute, it's fun, and I remember it better that way.
Yes, I 100% agree with this, as we watch my pigeons flying in the
Yes.
background. um, and no, I thought it was one of my favorite talks, and definitely partly just because I do love hearing about pets. So, and and it makes it more of a real narrative. And I think we react to storytelling, and it makes the story more interesting to know that there's some characters in here who are based on real life.
It's
So,
also easier to tell the story as the storyteller, because saying authorization server so many times, I like stumble over the words, I mix up the servers, but I never stumble over Orzo, Rigatoni, or Fuseli's names. So
okay, I just want to remind everyone that there's a link to Emily's presentation on the episode notes. And we have a little format here. It's always glue.co/IOH- the episode number. So this is episode 198. Um, and maybe I'll dig up the RFCs we were talking about and couldn't like roll off the tip of our
yeah,
tongue, and add them up there too, if we can figure it out. Um, and then the next episode, it's a GovOps episode. So as the host of this show, we slip in GovOps episodes about every 20 episodes or so, and it's that time again. So Rohit Kare and I are going to talk about some really new news at GovOps. where we're figured out the first piece of work that we're actually going to undertake, which is a pretty boring YAML file, which creates a sort of inventory of capabilities.
Mm.
So in MCP jargon, you have actions, and sometimes the resources are implicit. Like the action is feed, and the resource is guinea pigs or food for guinea pigs. But so we're trying to figure out a new way to inventory all those capabilities, and we think this really maps better to modern security like MCP. So please tune in next Thursday. Rohit and I will be chatting on this. One more quick reminder in case you missed it, please follow IOH on LinkedIn and YouTube. And with that, I will say thank you so much for Emily for coming on. I know you're busy and just getting back from some time off. So thank you, Emily, for being
Thank you
on.
so much, Mike, for having me. This was a blast to talk about.
Okay, and thanks, audience, and we'll see you next time.